We'll start the first share of the afternoon series. We're starting first, we'll be discussing a few shiurim on the topic of naamanus. The first share is on the topic that you learned this past week and a half, which is naamanus, mainly naamanus of a yid who is not mechal Shabbos or eved avodah zarah or something which will make him completely not naaman. The first halach in Shulchan Aruch Yeridea says, "Hakol sheichten lechatchila." Everybody sheichts lechatchila. Afilu noshim va'avodim v'chol adam afilu imakirin oisei shemухזק lishchet shelo yisalef. Anybody who, even if you don't know that he's מוחזק lishchet, v'gam in yoidim boi shu mumche v'yoidea hilche shchita. Even if you don't know that he's a mumche and knows hilche shchita, muter lo lechatchila lishchet umuter lechel mishchitasai. Sheroiv arigilin lishchet and becheskas mumchim umухזקים. Yeah, that means the majority, anybody is lachatchila, everybody could check. If a woman, slaves, va'avodim, any person, even if you don't know that he's a mухזק, that he could check properly, and you don't know that he's a mumche and knows the shchita, lachatchila, you could check, and you could eat from a shchita, because the majority of people are becheskas mumchim and muchzakim. In your booklet, I printed the Alter Rebbe, in the booklet that I gave out today, but after the 3 pages of the Rambam, 4 pages of the Rambam, you have Alter Rebbe Sif Cotton Beis, not the Kuntasachen, the Sif Cotton Beis. The idea that the Alter Rebbe comes to discuss over here is as follows. The Tur, when he discusses this halacha, he writes the words Noshim ve'avodim meshuchrorim, released slaves, not avodim, stam. And that, the Beis Yosef comes and asks the question, what difference does it make if it's meshuchrer or not? If it's evet she'eina meshuchrer, he's still chayav on mitzvahs, just like a woman. So why does the Torah have to add the words meshuchrorim? Over there, that's a question of Beis Yosef. The Drisha al-Asar explains that the evet, which is not meshuchrer, the only reason he's toivel, he converted tovel and mol v'tovel, is because he was forced into it when he was purchased as a slave. And therefore, he's not really interested in it. He was against his will, and therefore he's not trusted. But if somebody, meshuchrer, according to the Torah, he is trusted. The Shach in Pirush Arich adds on this, like expands this idea of the Drisha, and he says, therefore, if you recognize, if you know the Eved, and you know that this Eved, even though he's not a Meshuchrer, he has good midas, doesn't have all the bad midas of an Eved, then he's relied. Why? Because be'etzem, roiv, metzuyim, etzel shchita, the majority of people who are involved in shchita are mumchim and muchzakim. And therefore, once you know that he has the right midas, you don't have to search anymore, and ever he's trusted. Ultimately, this doesn't explain why the Mechaber writes just avodim. You want, why the Torah writes meshuchrorim, we understand. The Torah doesn't go on this concept that you have to know them. The Torah goes on the concept, if he's meshuchrer, he's fully yid, and he has naamanus. And if he's not meshuchrer, he's not really interested in it, doesn't have a naamanus. But why does the Beis Yosef just write simply avodim? Or he should write meshuchrarim, either or. Or maybe he should write that there are avodim which are known, like the Drisha and the Shach, right? And on this, the Shach explains very simple, that the Lashon that the Alter Rebbe quotes from the Beis Yosef, from the Shach, which is on the next page of, in same Sifkot and Beis of the Alter Rebbe. Beis Yosef shehish mitevas meshuchrarim, the Beis Yosef who he did not use the words avodim meshuchrarim, just avodim, he goes also tamei, he goes based on his own svara, because he holds the svara the gam b'shar b'nei adam b'inun sheyehei hashochet naaman. Across the board, when we're talking about a shochet, he has to have naamanus. V'lo dai b'cheskas kashrus shekol Yisrael. It's not enough to have the regular standard cheskas kashrus that every Jew has. אלא שיודעים ומכירים בו שהוא אדם kosher ונאמן. You have to know and you have to recognize that he is an Adam kosher v'ne'eman. Like the B'siyas writes in the name of the Rambam, Shem Rambam. And therefore, he didn't have to mention over here the concept of makirim, of that they know him. Why? Because obvious, the pshitut le'adifi avodim misham bnei Adam. It's obvious that Eved is no less than every other person. Just like every other person, he has to be yoidim u'makirim bo shu Adam kosher v'ne'eman. By Eved, for sure. Based on that, Alter Rebbe adds, he brings from a quote, he continues and he discusses about the Rav who gives Kabbalah, and he tells from here you see what's this Adam kosher v'ne'eman. He says the Rav which gives a Kabbalah to a Sheikhet has to lachkir olav. He says, Im Adam kosher, v'drochav mesukanim, v'yiras Hashem al panav, shi'edei alilmud ilahavim ba'atzme b'gmari u'pirush Rashi. Why? Because as Yeshua Lev Lizair means what's the definition so far? He has to be Adam kosher, has to be Adam kosher drochav mesukanim, he has to be behave properly with Yiras Hashem al panav, recognizes Yiras Hashem, he has to know how to learn, because if he doesn't know how to learn, he's a bur ein bur yirei chet, it's not going to help anything. Ve'achshav, Alter Rebbe continues, now sherabu noisni kabbalah b'lirishu v'chkira. Now, Alter Rebbe brings this from the Simul Chadasha, that today, in those days of the Simul Chadasha, they would give Kabbalah without proper chkira. Therefore, if you're a person who has Yiras Hashem in your heart, you only eat meat from people that you know that he's an Adam kosher, v'yirei Shemayim. That's the two of the things we said before. Oh, Yishu be'ir sheresho imir Hashem shevad rosh v'chokro achrav heitev. Or you're in a place where you know that the people in charge of the shchita properly did their research on these people. You also do research to people in town about the shechet. Find out if he's not a drunkard, he doesn't have bad behavior, and then you could eat from his shchita. That is the definition. We'll see. That seems like this is the explanation we have. Shulchan Aruch says avodim. The Alter Rebbe brings from the Shach that the reason for avodim is it's avodim, and for sure, just like everybody else, that they have to have adam kosher v'ne'eman with a special cheskas, with a special ne'emanus and mוחזק and a special kashrus, adam kosher v'ne'eman, and that is based on the sheet of the Rambam. And to do that, you have to do, and what does that define? Seems like the definition is Adam kosher, yirei Shemayim, that he knows how to learn, doesn't get drunk, etc. Why do we have to have, now the Alter Rebbe in Kudasach and Sefkot and Beis, that's where he discusses in the months, which is what becomes relevant to what we learned this past week. But before we get to the introduction, you have the Rambams in the beginning of your booklet, first few pages. There are three Rambams in Ilchos Macholos Asuros. And it seems like I forgot to print one of the pages, the first one. Okay, fine, I'll read it to you, Galpa. In Perek Gimel Ilchos Macholos Asuros, Halacha Chof, the Rambam says that eggs of a fish have the same simanim as eggs of a chicken, of a kosher bird, to know if they're kosher or not. Therefore, it has to be that it's pointy on one end and round on the other end. Now, therefore, if you go and you want to buy eggs from a yid, and you see that the eggs, if the eggs are both edges are pointy, both edges are completely round, then you can't buy it b'chlal. If one edge is pointy, one edge is round, then you ask him. You ask the Jew, if he says, I salted the fish, I took these eggs out of this fish, kosher the fish, he's trusted. But if he just tells him, these eggs are kosher, you can't rely on him. That you have already on your page. Unless it's a person which is mוחזק בכשרות. Then the Rambam continues in Ochafal, v'chein gvina v'chatichas dag, shem bosimon al Misraeli shehוחזק בכשרות. Same thing when it comes to fish. I mean, just like eggs, when it comes to eggs, it comes to fish and cheese. Fish without skin, that doesn't have a siman, or cheese that you could only buy from a yid that mוחזק בכשרות. Yeah, but in Eretz Yisrael, when the majority of people were yidden, in those days you were able to buy from anyone. The Maggid Mishnah right away points out to you, and in the on Halacha Chaf Aleph, what's the Yesod of the Rambam? He says it's based in the Gemara. Certain things that the Gemara mentions in the Masechta Avodah Zarah that you could only buy from a mumche. If you're buying it in Syria, it says in Syria you cannot buy these things unless a person is a mumche. 6 things. And what does Syria mean? The Rambam understands Syria to mean. Syria means anywhere except for Eretz Yisrael those days. So anything that's not Eretz Yisrael in those days is already in the category of this Syria that you can't buy unless the person is a mumche. And Maggid Mishnah continues, Vadai, kol shekenu b'chutz la'aretz, v'af Eretz Yisrael b'zman hazeh kechutz la'aretz, saying that Eretz Yisrael today is like chutz la'aretz back then, and therefore you can only buy these things from this mumche, this mוחזק בכשרות. Ukmoi shebi Rabbeinu Perek Yud Aleph, like the Rambam will explain in Perek Yud Aleph, which you probably all learned already. Now, the next place where this concept comes up is a few parakim later in Hilchos Mechoros Asuros in Perek Ches. There is in the end of Halacha Zayin, this is about Shchita, it says, Ve'ein loikchin basar mikol taboch, you can't buy meat from any butcher, ela im ken hoya adam kosher, u'mוחזק בכשרות, not only adam mוחזק בכשרות, adam kosher u'mוחזק בכשרות, mוחזק בכשרות hu, sheshoichet le'atzmoi, shechts for himself, u'moicher, and he shechts the animals, and he himself is the one who sells it, and then v'ne'eman is trusted. The Rambam continues, same idea, this applies to Chutz La'aretz, but Eretz Yisrael, time when all the Yidden are there, it's all the same. It's all good. And the Maggid Mishnah points out to you over here also, regarding the fish, in Perek Gimel, the same thing applies for meat. Comes Perek Yud Aleph, the third place of the Rambam. All these 3 are relevant to what the Alter Rebbe is going to discuss and to the halachas of Siman Kuf Yutes. Halacha Chaf Hei, over here the Rambam explains as follows. Bizman she'oisa Eretz Yisrael, kulo Yisrael, when the Yidden all controlled Eretz Yisrael, then you could buy wine from anybody. V'chutz la'aretz lo'yilochin adam she'mוחזק בכשרות. And the chutz la'aretz you only get from an adam she'mוחזק בכשרות. Halacha Chaf Hei. בזמן הזה, but today, אין loikchin yain b'chol mokim elo me'odom she'mוחזק בכשרות. To buy wine you can only buy from somebody she'mוחזק בכשרות. Same lashon that you see in Shchita, same lashon you see when you negea eggs, fish, and cheese. V'chein, and he continues, v'chein ha'basar, v'agvina, v'chasichas dag, she'en bo siman, k'moi she'b'yanu, like we explained, that to purchase from somebody you have to have an adam she'mוחזק בכשרות. Comes the Ravid, and right away comments on it, Omar Avram, Zu Eina Mishnah. This doesn't really have a real source. She'ein Ami Oretz Chashudim Lehachlif, V'lo limkar davar asur la'im kein nechshad. Unless a person has a specific chashad, he is trusted. You don't have to have a specific cheskas kashrus, all you just have to have the guy does not have a chashad. This is the machlekes between the Rambam and the Ravid over here. The Kesef Mishnah takes the approach that the Ravid Pashat didn't know about this Gemara. He brings the Rashba. That the Rashba says that this is based on the Gemara in Ein Ma'amidin and Masechta Avodah Zarah, that you can't buy those 6 things that Rosh Hashanah Yud Mem Ches Gimel, which is wine, Murias Chalav, Melech Slakanduris, Chiltis, and Kvina, in Syria unless it's a Mumche. And obviously the Rambam understood that Syria means a general term for everywhere outside Eretz Yisrael, or Eretz Yisrael in today's day and age. Therefore, there isn't really a kasha, and the Ravid's kasha doesn't stick, and that's it. The Lechem Mishneh and the Radbaz, both of them on the page, they both understand that there is a Yesodistic Machlikas between the Rambam and the Ravid on understanding this Gemara. It seems like the Ravid understands that Surya is a specific example because Surya was known in those days, the people in Surya were known to be of a very bad moral character. And therefore you couldn't trust them. But anywhere else, unless you have a specific reason for chashad, you don't have to worry about it. And the Rambam takes Surya is an example for the rest of Chutzaretz. I need to be Mוחזק that he is a Adam kosher. Mוחזק bekashrus. Then the Rambam concludes in Halacha Chavav, when you eat by somebody else's house, talking about buying, talking about when you eat by somebody else's house, and in any place, in any time, if he serves you wine, cheese, meat, fish, it's mutter, you don't have to ask him, as long as you know that he's Jewish. But im Mוחזק she'einei kosher, but if he has a farkerta chazaka, that he's not a Adam kosher, and he's not medakdek in these things, then you're not allowed to eat in his house. And if you're stuck in his house, you could only eat until somebody will give you testimony on this guy or on this food give you testimony on this food that this food is good. Now to the Kuntres Achron of cotton base. Yeah, the Alter Rebbe starts by bringing the B'si Yosef here in Siman Aleph. He brings the Mordechai name Rabbi Nachananel says that the Sheikhet has to be Ne'eman. Why? What does Ne'eman mean? We're not choishish he's going to be Machal Nevelis Treifus. And the Mordechai says he does not know where the Rabbi Nachananel got it from. Because we know Rev Yisrael, Cheskas Kasha, so why do you need a specific Ne'emanus? This is all the B'si Yosef. The B'si Yosef brings it from the Rambam in Perek Ches, Vilchus Machos Asur, which discusses Shchita. It's mashma that he holds like the Rach. And the Rav Magid already brought the ayat to the Rambam over there. And that's where the B'si Yosef, that's the quote that Alter Rebbe brings to the B'si Yosef. And on that, the Darkei Moshe writes right away that the Rambam, that this is not enough of a lie, because the Rambam is talking about someone who shechts for himself and sells to others. But Stama Sheichet doesn't need such a high bar. And the Darkei Moshe says, but since today people don't come and bring their knives to the Rav every time, tzarich shiur adam kosher, to be adam kosher. Then the Alter Rebbe goes into discussing what is these. First he starts as bringing what the Rambam says. He quotes the Rambam that you can only buy meat from somebody who is kosher u'mוחזק bekashrus. What does that mean? And it's kosher mוחזק bekashrus. We don't know yet. We saw before what the Alter Rebbe says what a Rav has to test for, but right now adam kosher u'mוחזק bekashrus, that he shechts for himself and sells to others. And that's also what the Shulchan Aruch himself writes in Sif Hey. And the Alter Rebbe then continues and brings what the Maggid Mishnah wrote in Perek Gimel. What the Maggid Mishnah sends you to Perek Gimel, and then Perek Gimel, the Rambam just says the same thing about cheese and about fish, that you can only buy from Yisrael Shuchat Bekashrus. It brings also what it says in Perek Yud Aleph regarding wine. Also, you can only buy from somebody Shuchat Bekashrus, and that is learned all from the Gemara in Masechta Avodah Zarah regarding those 6 things that in Surya you can only buy from a mumche. And he explains, obviously the Rambam Shitta is that Surya means anywhere outside Eretz Yisrael then, and today also includes Eretz Yisrael. Then Alter Rebbe comes and explains it. So based on this, Rambam, when the Rambam says that he shechts for himself, the idea is that the one who sells is also the sheichet. When the one who shechts is also the one who sells, you have to have the special ne'eman, mוחזק bekashrus, all these conditions. But if this guy is the butcher, and there is a specific sheichet that he buys from, one sheichet shechts for one butcher, then it seems like it's ne'eman even without the special mוחזק bekashrus. Why? As long as there's a stam chesed kasher v'srot, it's mashma that it's fine. Why is that? Because the shoichet we know, hakol the roiv mitzvim it's a shchita are mumchim. And this shoichet that shechts and then sells to, and then the butcher sells it, he's worried, he has mirtas. The concept of mirtas, he's worried, he's scared. He's scared that someone's going to come and ask. If he's going to get caught lying, he's going to be in trouble. So he doesn't want to get caught lying. And therefore, because of this concept of mirtas, he is trusted when a specific sheichet selling to a butcher, that as long as the butcher has a cheskes kashos, that you could trust him that he said that it comes from the sheichet, then it's fine. What is it similar to? The Alter Rebbe said it's similar to another halacha, which we have later on in Siman Beis If Daled. So just turn 2 pages, Siman Beis If Daled, also on Shulchan Aruch. Mumar l'te'avain. Yeah, when you have a mumar l'te'avain, what exactly mumar l'te'avain is not going to discuss in detail today. Mumar l'te'avain means somebody who's a mumar, but is not against, ideologically against Torah. And he shechts for himself, and he has a good knife, and he says that he shechted with a good knife, he's trusted. And if he has, even if he has meat in his hands, you didn't see him shechting, and he tells you, mumche shochat li, a mumche shechted for me, he's trusted as long as there are mumchim in town. This is what the Alter Rebbe brings as a proof. The Alter Rebbe here explains what it is. Why is it that this guy is trusted? Based on this, you understand, we're going to go back to Kuntasach and Siman Aleph to understand what it means. So here the Alter Rebbe goes and explains, this is in Sifkat Yud Beis of the Biur, not of the Kuntasach. Why is he trusted to say, mumche shochat li, that a mumche shechted for me? We're not worried that he's going to specifically put aside hetera, something which is kosher, because he has to of going to the mumche in town to get shechted, and specifically go and eat isur. First reason. Second reason, or hemshech reason, and we're not going to say that maybe we shouldn't trust him because it's too much work to run around. The only time we do this is when it's a tircha rabba, checking a knife, takes a long time, walking over to the tircha zuta, it's not enough of a tircha to say, he's going to go dafke. He's going to go, he could walk over to the mumche's house, but he's definitely going to go elsewhere and definitely going to eat treif. We're not choshed him so much. Therefore, that's the first 2 reasons why he's trusted. But still, a few lines down, he says, we still have a chashash that maybe, being that there is only a few mumchim in every town, maybe he's going to go and not going to find them, and he's going to go to somebody who's not a mumche or shecht himself, he's not going to be trusted. So therefore, as long as he says mumche shochat li, a mumche shechted for me is trusted, that's all he has to say. Why? Because we say there's no reason for him to be shavik atera when it's only a small tirche, small work. He's not going to put it aside. Or chayshish, maybe he's not going to find the person, so as long as he tells you mumche shochat li, that's enough. Why is mumche shochat li? The Alter Rebbe adds, because really, logically, it's not enough. What is mumche shochat li, and there's people in town, doesn't tell you who he went to. Why is it so? Why is he trusted? Okay, we say doesn't have a reason to dafka give you treif meat. Doesn't have an intentional reason. It's not so much work for him. So, but why is he still trusted? So Alter Rebbe adds that this is enough. When he says mumche shochat li, ika oit chada lemal yusa. There's another benefit together with it. The mirtas l'shaker. He's worried to lie. Shema yishal samuche. They're going to go. There's only a few mumchim in town. They're going to ask each people, you shechted for the mummer? You shechted for the mummer? They're going to say no. He's going to lose all his credibility. He's not interested in doing it. Yeah, and even though usually when it comes to a mumar, we don't rely on stam, just mirtas. Why? Because a regular mumar, because he's around Yidden, he's not thinking that anybody's going to question him. He thinks everybody trusts him. So he doesn't have the mirtas. He says it's still, over here it's different. Because when he says, when they ask him, where do you get the meat from? And he says, from the mumcha, then he's trusted. He knows that they check up on him. He knows that his credibility is on the line. He's not interested in losing credibility, so he's going to continue. He's going to say the truth. As long as he says, mumcha shachat, it's enough. He knows that they don't trust him on shchita, but we know he sees that it's going to say that he's a mumcha. Now the Rebbe continues, yes, the Taz and the Shach say that you have to say mumche ploini shachat li, a specific mumche bot for me, shechted for me. You can't just say mumche shachat li. You can't just say randomly mumche shachat li. Kilikamon siman kuf yutes, which is a siman kuf yutes in seif yutes, where over there it's in the other booklet where Alter Rebbe quotes it also. When you tell a person to buy for you, when you go to a person who doesn't eat gvinas Yisrael, he eats gvinas akum, something which is awesome. You don't go buy from me gvinas ksherim min hamumche, and he says, I bought gvina ksherim me hamumche. He's not ne'eman. If he says me'ish ploini mumche, then he is ne'eman. If he says from a specific person, then he is trusted. That's what, and the Shach over there explains that the reason why you have to say specifically the name of the person, the Shach in Kuf Yutes and Sifkot Lamed He explains, the Mirtas Shema Yisha Lo Yise Ploini. Because he's worried once he says a name, maybe they're going to ask the other Ploini, and then he's going to be caught lying. And that's why he's not going to lie. So they're based on that. That's why the Shach and Taz say over here also that you need to have you have to give a specific person. So Alter Rebbe explains, but the Tur and Shulchan Aruch don't say ploini. In Kuf Yutes they say you have to say the name of the person. Over here it just says mumche shachat li. You just have to say a mumche. He says the reason is because over here it's different. Over there in Siman Kuf Yutes, in the case of cheese, when a person says, I bought them from a mumche without telling you who the name is, there can be a situation that he thinks the guy's a mumche, but I don't think the guy's a mumche. This guy who's not trusted, he thinks that he's going to go to a store with the owner that looks in a specific way, and he's going to say, I trust him. But for me, it's not enough. That's why I have to know who it came from. But over here, when it comes to shchita, no, because over there, when it comes to shchita, we say Rev Mitzvim, it's the majority of people that are by shchita are trusted, are mumchim, and therefore, as long as you say mumche shechted for me, that's already enough. So you don't have to say who the mumche was. That's what the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch say it. And that's enough because there's already the concept of mirtas. They're going to ask the mumche, even if there's a lot of mumchim in town. It's also good. And Alter Rebbe concludes over here this topic. Over here that regardless the idea of mirtas by itself is not good enough for trusting this guy when it comes to buying meat from trusting this mummer. Mirtas by itself is not enough. Only together with the svara of loishavik etera v'achal isura because of the walk. Because the Torah Chalicha is not so long. Why is that? Because the reason of mirtas, maybe somebody's going to ask him where it comes from, only works in the Rabbanan, not in the Raisa. And that is in Kuf Yutes, same Kuf Yutes. So if you test towards the end, the Ramah over there writes that it only applies for the Rabbanan, not the Raisa. So why are we relying on him over here? Mirtas itself, just mirtas, maybe someone's going to ask him, is not enough. Is because, and he says, because over here we have another reason. And what's the other reason? That you also have the reason that he doesn't have any reason to be shavik ketera and achal isura. What's the reason why in Deiraisa we're not soymech, when the Rabbanan we are a little bit more? Is because in Deiraisa we're choishesh, maybe the mumar Bichlal is not expecting anybody to ask him. He doesn't think people are going to ask him. He thinks people are going to believe him. So that's why he's not worried about it. So that's why it's not enough mirtas of telling somebody mirtas because somebody might ask you is not strong enough, because he knows most people are not going to ask him. So when is he trusted? By Nichnas v'Yetzel. Rebbe introduces another concept over here. When is he trusted? Mashen can be Yisrael Yetzel v'Nichnas. Then mirtas does help. Just mirtas alone, without a second svara, does help. Why? Because they're worried. Nichnas v'Yetzel, maybe they're going to catch him when he's doing something wrong, and he's going to be in trouble if he lies. Then Rebbe goes to another topic, and same thing, just aside, because we're already discussing this Sifkat and Yud Beis. Even though it's not so relevant to what we learned in Siman Aleph, still going to discuss it over here. Just interesting. Al Rebbe also brings the concept that if you have a city where you have standard kosher butchers, and a mumar comes with a piece of meat, he's relied upon. He doesn't even have to say I bought it from a kosher butcher. Why? Because a chazak, he's not, there's a little bit of walking, he's going to go to the kosher butcher, he's not going to go to a different butcher. But when does this work? We're not going to say shavik atera of walking, he's not going to put aside this just because he has to walk a few more steps and go dafke by treif. But when is that? He adds, Yodua, there are a few rules. First of all, kosher and treif have to be the same price. If kosher is more expensive than treif, he's not trusted. Then you can't trust him to say that he bought specifically from the kosher, because it's more expensive. Not only that, it has to be common in town that kosher and treif are the same price, or pretty much average the same price. If usually kosher is more expensive than treif, even though today kosher is the same price as treif, it's not enough. Why? Because we don't say, oh, he went today to check the butcher and see if it's cheaper, and dafka today bought. The fact is, the only way it works, this chazakah of that if there's a town that has old Jewish stores, and the guy, not old Jewish, has an abundance of Jewish butchers, and the mumar has a piece of meat that he's trusted, is only when it's standard that the price of treif and kosher is the same, and it's standard that, and today it's also the same, cheaper. It's also today's cheaper. But if it's not, then he's not trusted, because he doesn't have that mirtas. Mirtas alone is not enough. Concept over here, mirtas alone is not enough. Even mirtas that they're going to ask you is not enough. Bechal and Deiraisa, mirtas is not enough. Especially when it's just a mirtas, when they're going to ask you, is also not enough. Only when it's together with the shavik atera, we're not choishesh that is going to put aside the heter when it's a very little work and no difference of price. So now let's go back to the Kundasachrin in Siman Aleph. Right, so after the Alter Rebbe brings what the Rambam says, which we mentioned before, that Sheichet Le'atzmai, he's his own seller, but really when it's going to be, because when the Sheichet is also one who sells, because then he has a mirtas, he's worried, maybe people are going to ask him, and he's going to be, and when the butcher sells somebody else's meat, a specific Sheichet, that mirtas is enough, and people are going to ask him. So the Alter Rebbe right away asks, even though the Alter Rebbe says in an even though way, Afagav, it's a question. The question is in Deiraisa, that we know that we can't rely on mirtas alone. And mirtas, when people check up after you, is also not enough. So Alter Rebbe introduces this concept of mirtas, that you have to have a mir, that you don't trust mirtas by Deiraisa, and you don't trust mirtas when he's worried that people are going to ask about him, is only by a chashud bevade, when a person has a specific chashad on him. If he does not have a specific chashad on him, he doesn't need this concept of mirtas. Stam Yisrael and the cheskes kashrus. Elamai, the only thing is, he doesn't have the specific adam kosher chazaka that we need for shchite. So then mirtas is enough. In such a scenario, mirtas is enough, even though you don't check up after him. But that only applies when he buys from one specific sheichet. If he buys from a bunch of sheichetim, the Alter Rebbe says that's he already falls into the category of chatichas dag, gvina, and yayin, the one who sells those three things. Now, obviously, the fact that the Alter Rebbe brings it over here means the Alter Rebbe seems to go based on the shit of the Rambam, right? Now comes the Kosav Ramah B'Darkei Moshe and Siman Kuf Yutes. We have in Siman Kuf Yutes right in the beginning of we have the Tur, and over there the Tur says that somebody who's chashut to eat dvarim asurim, you can't rely on him. You can't eat from the things that he's chashut on those specific things. And it only applies to a chashut, al b'stam kol adam u b'cheskas kosher v'yachol echolim, a regular person you could eat with. And even if he has a chashad that he sells dvarim asurim, you can still eat in his house if he has a chazakah that he eats kosher. Yeah, and then comes the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef over here brings the Gemara first in Bechoshet of Stam Kol Adam, that you could rely on him. The Beis Yosef first brings the Gemara that the Rav Magid uses as the Magid Mishnah uses as a raya for the Rambam. Then he quotes the whole lashon of the Rambam in Perek Yud Aleph about the difference in Eretz Yisrael B'zman Hazeh and everything else. And he brings it. And he brings also what the Rambam writes in Perek Gimel and the other places, that it needs to be Adam Mוחzek Bekashus, and the Beis Yosef does not bring anybody disagrees with him. Comes the Darkei Moshe and points out to you something where he says Divrei Tur Gam K'tzas Mashma Hochi. But when you read the Torah, it seems a little bit that he does follow the shit of the Rambam. Omnam haminhag einakein. The minhag by us is not like that. Elo machzekinon kol adam becheskas kashus. Every person is trusted with a cheskas kashus, and you don't need the specific cheskas kashus of the Rambam, the huchzak bekashus, the adam, the specific huchzak bekashus. Rather, as long as a regular yid who doesn't have any chashad on him on these topics, he's already trusted. That is how the Darkei Moshe understands the Tur. It means he brings the minig is faket, but he understands the Tur follows the Rambam. So the Alter Rebbe first starts by saying that the Darkei Moshe understood the Tur follows the Rambam. The Leike Shach Sham. The Shach disagrees with the Darkei Moshe. Shach understands that it's like the Ravid. The Shach understands that the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch both follow the Ravid. They both follow the shit of the Ravid, not like the Rambam. And he explains that that's also how Rashi, how it looks in Rashi. The first Shach in Siman Kuf Yutes. And then comes the Shach and asks a question over there. So why is it that in Siman Aleph, when it comes to Shchita, the Mechaber says that you do have to have the Naamanus by Shchita? And the Beis Yosef says over there that it's not enough to have the regular Naamanus. Same thing is also Siman Samachay. The answer is, the Shach says, because there's a big difference. The Tur and the Mechaber differentiate between Shchita is one inyan, and Gvina, Dagim, Basar, all the other things are different. Either I'm going to put them all together, but the Tur and the Mechaber separate them. By Shchita, they're Machmer. Because Shchita is more common, and there are much more halachas of Shchita, and it's much easier to mess up in Shchita. And therefore, if it doesn't have specific cheskas kashos, it's also. But over here, when it comes to cheese and to fish and to all these things, it's not so complicated. To know the halachas, it's simple. Now, fish is only two things. You just have to know you've got fins and scales. Eggs, you have to know what chicken it came from, which bird it came from. And cheese, you have to also know that it was made by a yid. It's not so complicated. Shchita, one cut of a knife, you can have there's five things that that makes a shchita possible. That's before even starting to get into all the bdikas and everything else, all the bdikas pnim, everything you have to check if it's a treifa. Just on Shchita you have so many more halachas. So therefore, by that it's different. That's a Shchita the Machmer. But over here, when it comes to all the other things, you don't need the specific Cheskas Kashrus. The Shach understands the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. You don't need a specific Cheskas Kashrus. All you need is to have a lack of a Chashad. A Yid has an inherent Cheskas Kashrus, and until there's a Chashad, he's kosher. And he says that that's what the Shach explains. But Alter Rebbe right away says, seems like he takes the opinion of the Ramon that Why does the Ramah hold that the Tur holds that way? And now the Alter Rebbe explains a very interesting concept. The Mashe Kosva Tur v'Shulchan Aruch Shom the Enlis Mechalacho Shu Dafka. When the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch they come and they tell you that that only a person who's chashud, you can't rely on him, but the regular person's chesed kashrus is fine, is only lechol limoi, is only to eat with him. You're a guest by him, or he sends you a present, then you could, that's enough. You don't have to have a specific chesed kashrus. You don't have to, as long as he's a regular yid, it's fine. Yeah, and he brings a life from the Braisa. But to purchase something, that's already different. To buy, when a person is selling, that you could only do for somebody who is Mוחzek Bekashus. That's the end of this paragraph on page Hey of the Alter Rebbe. But to purchase, that's not enough. That the way the Alter Rebbe understands the Tur, and that's how he says the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, and that's based on the Rambam, and that's how he explains how the Rambam understood it, is that when it comes to selling, you don't have just the lack of chashad is enough. You have to have an Odom Shehuchzak Bekashus. And that's how the Beis Yosef says it, brings it. The Beis Yosef brings the Rambam and the Maggid Mishnah Blishum Choylik. And the Tur, we already know that according to Darkei Moshe, he follows the Rambam. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Tur. So B'meila you have the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Tur. The Tur, according to Darkei Moshe, follows the Rambam. The Shulchan Aruch is the Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef himself only quotes the Rambam. And the Alter Rebbe explains that even the lashon of the Ramah of the Tur and the Mechaber is just to differentiate between somebody who buys and somebody who sells and somebody who hosts. Somebody who hosts, you don't need a special cheskas kashrus. Somebody who sells, you don't need a special cheskas kashrus. So that's how the Alter Rebbe understands this concept. I'm not going to continue with the rest of this Kuntas Achrin. Take a break from this Kuntas Achrin for now. So when you look at it from a simple understanding of the Kuntas Achrin until now, the rest of it is not so relevant specific to this topic, is the Alter Rebbe seems to be noted the Shittah of the Rambam. No, it seems pretty clear that the Alter Rebbe is noted the Shittah of the Rambam. It happens to be we don't have Simon Kufi test in the Alter Rebbe, so we don't know what the Alter Rebbe would have written over there. But here, the way he explains it, the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring any other opinion. The Alter Rebbe works to put all the opinions to fit into the Rambam. Chooses Darkei Moshe who understood the Rambam that way. Beis Yosef who didn't bring anybody against the Rambam. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Tur. So obviously all of them fall into the box of the Rambam. The lashon doesn't fit perfectly with the Rambam because the Rambam says it doesn't fit so perfectly with the Rambam. No, the answer is no. It fits perfectly with the Rambam. When you're talking about eating by somebody, the Rambam clearly tells you that. The Rambam also differentiates. By eating, you can eat on anybody who's Jewish, as long as it doesn't have a chashad. Buying is not like that. And everything that the Mechaber writes is about eating by somebody, in Sareach, not by buying. Yeah, and what is this? So when it comes to buying, you have to have, when you buy from somebody, for the trust, the level of trust that you need for cheese, for fish, for meat, and for wine, for meat everybody agrees, but for all the other three, when it comes to buying, you have to have a special Mוחzek Bekashus. The Alter Rebbe doesn't differentiate, even though the Rambam does give you by Shchita, Perek Ches, the Rambam uses the Lashon Adam Kosher, I think, what's the Lashon of the Rambam? In Perek Ches, the Rambam uses the Lashon Adam Kosher or Mוחזק בכשרות. And the other, when it comes to fish and milk, fish and cheese and wine, it just says Mוחזק בכשרות. The Rebbe doesn't differentiate between the two. The Rebbe interchanges between the Mוחזק בכשרות, Adam Neman, Adam Kosher, all in one category. They're all the same. And what it is, evidently, the Alter Rebbe tells you what it is, because Alter Rebbe, when he explains what the Rav has to test for this guy to be Adam Kosher, gives you a whole list of things. So you could say maybe the Alter Rebbe this is for a person who's a shoichet, not for a person who sells, but it doesn't seem like that. The fact that Alter Rebbe doesn't differentiate, it seems like Alter Rebbe does hold that you have to have a specific cheskas kashrus when you deal with these four things, these four big things, which is cheese and fish without skin, fish without simanim, wine and meat. That's what it seems like from the Alter Rebbe. What is exactly this cheskas kashrus? We'll go, how much is it? With an Alter Rebbe, it seems like it's a very simple concept. You have to have this cheskas kashrus. What's this ne'emanis? And bechlal, do we follow the Rambam? Are we more machmir as opposed to the shach? Do we go that way or not? If we turn a little bit further in your book, here's a Tzemach Tzedek, which I only will read to you the first and last paragraph. Like in Tikkun Leil Shavuos, you only read the beginning and the end. Siman Aleph, the first tshuva in the Shas Tshuva Yeridea. Stories are always good. Yeah, Shaychet, that they checked up on him and they found a sirche, they found there was a problem in the lung. And he explains, he farentfit why he messed up on it. He didn't realize that there was more sirches over there. And the shaila was, maybe we have to fire this guy from being a shoichet. Maybe you just fire him for a month. The idea was maybe fire him for a month, temporary suspension. Im Kabbalas Divrei Chaveros, that's Kuf Dalet Ches, that you're just going to reaccept upon himself to be a stringent Orthodox Jew. That's enough. Like it explains in the Alter Rebbe, that the Pesheya, and this is an Alter Rebbe in Siman Beis, and Kuntres Achren Hey, I think. Kuntres Achren Hey, over there the Alter Rebbe explains about going back if somebody has to fix his reputation. If he stops doing something wrong, he goes back to being good. On somebody that's b'derech kalush and b'derech b'shat nefesh. But the problem is, so over here, problem is that 1 month is going to destroy this guy. He's a poor guy, Evian Godel, and he has kids in the house. And now is the time before Chanukah. And the Chanukah, they shecht avazos, ducks. Maybe we'll put him away from shechting animals. Why? Because he botched up on the animals. No silchis in the chicken. At least he should shecht birds. He's going to lose a lot, because this month before Chanukah is when everybody shechts those birds, and he's going to lose a lot of money. So what can we do about it? So after the Tzemach Tzedek goes through a whole long tshuva, where he explains that l'chayra, different svaris why maybe we should be machmer, maybe it's not enough to take him to take him off, maybe it's not enough to give him, maybe this is bad enough that he should be put on vacation, maybe it's not so bad that he could go shecht right away. And he says that l'chayra, you would think that you have to be machmer. This is the end of the tshuva, the amnam, the chayra. The chayra, you do have to be machmer. Why? Because the B'Seir Sefer at the beginning of Siman Aleph in the Tur, he writes that the sheikh has to be ne'eman. Puts the category of ne'eman. Yeah, and the shach, when he discusses this topic in Siman Kuf Yutes and Sifkat Aleph, the shach that we mentioned before, he also understands the the Mechaber, the Beis Yosef, to say that by Shchita we have a specific din that you need the Adam Ne'eman. And also we have when the Darkei Moshe, he says, well, the Darkei Moshe in Siman Aleph says that maybe it's only for Sheichet La'atzmoi, Moichel La'acherim, but Stam Sheichet, you don't have to be Ne'eman. Right? But if it's a Sheichet of town, you do have to be Ne'eman. So maybe we should put him aside for doing this. And Darkei Moshe, even though Darkei Moshe says it only applies to somebody who shechts for himself and sells, over here he's a sheichet for town, he shechts for the butchers. Maybe he should therefore this sheichet, who is nechshad lemekel poshek tzas b'yisur treifa, he's a little bit of a poshek when it comes to treifas, for bedika, maybe he should not, even though he's not really considered chashud al nevelis because he only messed up once, still he loses this Adam Ne'eman category. What's the Adam Ne'eman category? The Tzemach defines it as sheyesh lo cheskas kashas miyuchedes. He has a special cheskas kashas in addition to the regular cheskas kashas that he has. But the Tzemach says no. Can't be used the Rambam and be machman in the Rambam more than what the Darkei Moshe himself was machman in the Rambam. Because the Rambam himself is based in the Gemara. The Rambam takes the approach that applies to all Chutz La'aretz. We saw that. Yeah, we discussed the shit of the Rambam. The Raiva is choylek on him and says that it only applies in Surya, because Surya was an exception to the rule. The Shach and the Pri Chodosh hold like the Raiva. The Shach and the Pri Chodosh, the Shach also explains that's how Rashi holds like the Raiva. It's mashma in the Ramban and in the Ran Avodah Zorah also like the Raiva. That Surya is an exception to the rule and not a generalization. And Amei Aretz are not to be disqualified and not trusted anywhere. No, only specifically Surya, but everywhere else they are trusted. Yeah, so therefore, it's we can't be more machman than Ramah. Okay, but you have a problem because the Ramah himself says that Bisman Hazeh, that they don't show the knives to the rabbis. You have to be Adam kosher. And therefore he says, okay, so Be'etzem Zetzorich Chiyun, he says maybe if he lost this category of Adam kosher. Ach be'emes nilim pnei hashgoga v'aktzas pshiyah ba'asircha lo yav cheskes kashur hayodua legamre. Just because he had a little bit of a pshiyah and he messed up once is not enough for him to lose this cheskas kashrus hayodua, this more extreme cheskas kashrus. And you can't compare it to a regular person that you don't know if he's mוחזק to Adam kosher. Because over here we know he had that chazakah. The question is, do we knock him off from the special chazakah? And the answer is we don't knock him off from the special chazakah. Because one time that he botched up on it. Yeah, now, just point out over here, the reason I brought this is not because I want to discuss Shiur, because that's what we're learning now. It's interesting to see that the way that Tzemach Tzedek approaches the sugya, it's the exact opposite of the Alter Rebbe approaches the sugya. The Alter Rebbe and Kuntasachan approach the sugya from a point of view. We have the Rambam. Let's fit the Tur into the Rambam. Let's fit the Shulchan Aruch into the Rambam. The Darkei Moshe understood it like that, and everything fits into the Rambam. And the shit of the Rambam is the shit that we follow. It seems like the Alter Rebbe that way. Tzemach Tzedek seems to go the other way around. You can't be more machmir than the Rambam when it comes to Shchita. The Rambam himself is based in the Gemara where Rashi and the Ramban and the Ran all don't hold like the Rambam. The Raivad himself disagrees on the Rambam. The Shach and the Pri Chodosh understand not like the Rambam. They themselves understand the Tur, that only when it comes to Shchita, the Shach understands that only when it comes to Shchita this applies, but every other place it doesn't apply. And therefore, because it's a case of Shchita, so we're going to have to figure out how to find an excuse out of it. But every other case, it shouldn't apply. So if you want to create a machlokes between the Tzemach Tzedek and the Alter Rebbe, a perfect example right now. Because it seems like the Alter Rebbe goes one way, it seems like the Tzemach Tzedek goes the other way. Problem is that both of them are talking about a Hilchah Shchita, relevant to Shchita, so we can't make a decision. I can't tell you for sure. It seems like, to me, it seems like the Alter Rebbe is Paskins like the Rambam, and Tzemach Tzedek Paskins like the Raivad. And they both understand the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch to fit in their way. The Alter Rebbe makes differentiation between selling and eating. The Tzemach Tzedek seems like he's taking the approach of the Rambam. I want to use an example of when a person does become, even though it's not so relevant to this week's topic, it's relevant to, not to this past week's topic, it's relevant to more to the coming topic, which is a person who becomes completely, loses his naamanus. But I do want to use just one example, because that's the famous tshuva of the Alter Rebbe regarding a person who lost completely his naamanus. How's he going to get back to it? It's a tshuva in Siman Tes. That's the next page in your booklet. It looks like a general letter, pretty much a shtickle michtav klali, regarding sheichtim that were masig gvul. Sheichtim that were not, they were going into towns that were already existing shchitas, and they would go and they would also shecht. And by that, it would cause damage to the existing sheichtim, because everybody would come to the sheichet of town, the few sheichtim in town, and they would shecht by them, and that's it. Now you have new people come to town, and they are competing with the existing shchitas, and they're causing them damage. Tzoika itim says nisrabu mikol mitzoika itim is a financial problem Hashem yirachem, and therefore masing gvul. So he says mishur asadin, straight up halacha, you can't passel them. Why? Because chashud l'davar echad is not chashud for other things. The fact is, what is he chashud on? He's chashud on masig gvul. It's not chashud on shchita. Nobody says that the sheichet is a bad sheichet. So especially since from Isur Kal to Isur Chamor, masig gvul is a Isur Kal, shchita treif is a Isur Chamor. So you can't really go and say we'll completely take him off. He says no. That's only applies when sheichet la'atzmai. Shechs for himself. That we say that he doesn't lose his cheskas kashus for himself. But if he's a sheichet for town, that over there you have to show your knife to the Rav. And if you don't show the knife to the Rav, they're going to be menade you. So over here, and therefore menade you and your shchita is not going to be considered kosher. And that's a small thing, just not showing your knife to the Rav. How much more so, Me'achad the Talmud Aruchu, the same Gemara was telling you have to show your knife to the Rav, otherwise you menade. The same Gemara, Talmud Aruchu, the onim habech becharor, if somebody is onim habech becharor, and do a sagas gvul, it's the Rosh. A Rosh is no longer Adam kosher. Ve'ena yoris, ain't Adam kosher, ve'ena yoris Hashem v'adai. It's clearly he's not a Yirei Hashem. So on something which is not nechshad, we leave him with cheskas kashus. Right? But he's not in the Lo mikri Adam kosher v'rei shamayim l'koil. Can't be that this person, the Gemara defines as a Rosh, is also going to be Adam kosher v'rei shamayim. The Lashon Alter Rebbe says, Ki harosha v'Adam kosher v'rei shamayim shnei hafchim. Can't, it's a contradiction. You can't also be considered a Rosh for being a masik gvul, also be considered Adam kosher v'rei shamayim for shchita. So therefore, he says, if a sheikh is masik gvul, can't be from a shchita. Comes at Tzemach Tzedek, says, I have no idea where my grandfather got this from. That's how he starts his, then he figures out how it does fit. Siman Yud Beis. Yeah, it was about a sheichet who did some kind of, who hid some information that would be a financial gain to somebody else. Let's put it, he didn't mess up the shchita, but financially he played some shtick when he was a sheichet. And the sheichet says, that guy convinced me to do it. I was roped into this. Question is, what's the din? So the Tzemach Tzedek begins by saying that we have a Darkei Moshe that Alter Rebbe brings, that the sheichet has to be Adam Naaman. And Bezman Hazeh, every sheichet has to be Adam Naaman because they don't show the knife. and therefore you need a lot of Yiras Shamayim. So if so over here, that and then he brings what Alter Rebbe says, that if a person is Masik Gvul is a category of Rasha, and therefore he loses, and therefore he becomes a Rasha, he's no longer considered the Adam Kosher Yiras Shamayim. And therefore, he says, it seems like the Mוחzek says, it seems like you wanted to use this tshuva as a raya, why? To passel the sheichet who was trying to avoid paying a certain price that he had to pay for the money. And even though Bepoil didn't end up doing it, he was caught before he did it, still, we have to do it. So comes the Mוחzek says in the second column, because he relied on this Alter Rebbe. So to research or understand what he says. He says, according to the Rambam, which is the Mekoyer for this Chumrah, if you want to follow the same Rambam, it seems that he does not lose his Cheskas Kashus for doing an Isur Kal. Why is that? Because the Rambam writes in Perek Zayin Hilchos Macholos Asuros that if a person, a butcher, does nikur, he says a butcher who does nikur, and afterwards they checked up on him and they found a chut or krum, they found a small thing that he missed over there, then you teach him and you warn him not to do it again. Only if he finds chaylev, by chaylev we completely fire him. Right? And usually the tabach, when it's talking about a tabach, it refers to a tabach who is also shechts and also sells. The same person, shechts and sells. And we see from the Rambam that you don't remove him from his position just because of a small isur of chut and krum. L'chayra, if you need a cheskas, this special cheskas kashrus, and this guy was mezalzel in this chut and krum, in this little thing of which is taka only the Rabbanon, so maybe still he should lose this category of the special cheskas kashrus that a person has. How is he still remaining as a sheichet? But the Rambam says no. Chut and krum, you don't fire him. You just teach him and you tell him that you fix it for the future. But Bepoil is over in the Yisur Midivrei Seifrim, he should be considered Rasha. Someone Avarian, someone is over in the Rabbanon is considered Rasha. And Kal V'chomer, even more, the fact that the Rambam over there was talking about similar Yisurim. When you make a problem with Nikur, it's the same problem, it's the same category of Isurei Achila as shechting animal wrong. So over there, the Rambam still says it's an Isur Kal. You would think it's an Isur Kal relevant to the big Isur. We don't remove him from a Shechita. For how much more so over here, where it's an Isur Kal of Mammon relevant to Shechita, it's not even in the same category. So why is it that he Alter Rebbe would say that because of Isur Mammon you should remove him, Isur Kal, Isur Mammon, you should remove him, and he's basing on the Rambam. But according to the Rambam himself, it doesn't fit with that. So first answer in Sif Aleph and Ois Aleph to Machzedek answers maybe because this chut or krum that they found or nikur is not anything which gives him a financial benefit. So because there's no chashash of mammon, we consider it a shoygig. When the person does masik rule, he's amazed. Then Machzedek says no, it's not good enough reason. Maybe the reason is because by shchit you need bdikas hasakin, you need bigir shamayim for checking the knife. But Machzedek also doesn't like that answer. So therefore he comes and he gives a third. In Ois Gimel, he says that this whole, to say this because Bdikas HaSakin is not enough, so he came up with a new idea, a new raya for it. Okay, the words of the Tzemach, I have a way of explaining it. Regarding to Tumah v'Tahara, it says, a chaver, category of a chaver, a person who's in the category of a chaver, who became a gabbai. What does a gabbai mean? Not a gabbai in shul. It means somebody who wanted to collect taxes for the king. at that moment he gets knocked off from his chaverus. Even though it's an aveda which has nothing to do with taharas, it's only aveda of mammon, and still the halacha is that you completely fire him. Why? And he says because he loses his cheskas kashrus. He says even though he says mashma, it says afilu min aveda achas she'eina shayach letaharas klal ki hu gam ken inyan mammon. Nase posel taharis ve'ovat cheskas kashrus hamiyuchedes. He loses a special cheskas kashrus. He doesn't lose his cheskas kashrus a klal Yisrael. He loses a special cheskas kashrus relevant to being a chaver when it comes to taharis. Because the mamish kediv Rabbeinu Zal. Because the Alter Rebbe writes, "Shavlei mikri adam kosher." He's no longer adam kosher. But he says, but based on this, we must explain that when the Alter Rebbe says that a masik gvul is no longer Adam kosher, just like if we use the raya from a chaver, just like by a chaver. Well, how does this guy becomes a gabbai? We say miyad that only applies when he does it and he continues, or he continues doing this avera. But the moment that he stops and he doesn't do it anymore, the moment he stops doing what he did wrong, the moment he stops being this tax collector for the king, he's fine. He's already back to being a chaver. So therefore, the chayre by the Alter Rebbe, the din of a sagas gush, is the same thing. That even though the sheikhet, if a sheikhet is masik gvul, it's only when he intentionally, actively is being masik gvul. If he messed up one time, that doesn't make him puzzle. If he did it and he stops, doesn't do it anymore, he goes back to being kosher. So therefore, the way he concludes in the end of Ois Gimel is, "Ubenidan shuv sheichet amasik gvul reiyu lefi divrei azmur zal tzarich leimer the doime ledin gabbai." You have to say that's the rayif, that's the place. Achim kol zeh dafka keshoymet b'merdoi lahasik gvul reiyu aris doime legabbai shalei pirish v'aymed alemdoi. The avad cheskas kashem mechedes. Only as long as he keeps it. V'shaper ele piska shabinu zal. But in this scenario, that there was only a one-time thing, even if one time he actually did it, and he fixes what he did wrong, it was only a matter of paying, he tried to get away from paying a specific fee on the animal, it's not enough to make him puzzle. Like a gabba that left, the koshkin shalas a klal. Over here, he got caught before he even did it. So for sure, he's not going to become possible. Yeah, but this is a topic I want to discuss. It's not really connected to this. It's more connected to the next topic that we're going to be learning. But when a person loses his cheskas kashrus or doesn't have it to begin with. So over here we see also it's this idea of a person who's goes back to his cheskas kashrus, loses his cheskas kashrus, gets it back, is discussed in Kuntas Achron, Sifkot and Hay, in Simon Beis. Simon Beis, Kuntas Achron, Sifkot and Hay, which is in this coming week's booklet. Yeah, so that's just a summary. So just to summarize again, we have, when it comes to what's this cheskas kashrus that you need, bechlal, is a cheskas kashrus miyuchedes, if you want to use the Tzemach Tzedek's lashon, Adam kosher v'ne'eman, if you use the Alter Rebbe's lashon, Adam ne'eman, use the Ramah's lashon, Mוחzek bekashrus, use the Rambam's lashon. It's all one and the same, pretty much. That it's a person who not only, that's one category. Then you have a chashud, person who is nechshad and doing wrong things. In the middle you have cheskas kashrus, general cheskas kashrus of Klal Yisrael. When the person is chashud, is not trusted according to everyone. Specific chashud, this means chashud for something. Not when it's Shabbos and Vidazor, that's a different category. When he has a special cheskas kashrus, he's trusted for everything according to everyone. And the middle cheskas kashrus, that he doesn't have a chashad, doesn't have a special cheskas kashrus, that's where it falls into the definition of where we're going to fit it. If we're going to fit it according to the way the Shach understands the Mechaber and the Pri Chodesh understands the Mechaber, that even that only for meat we have this chumrah that you have to have a special cheskas kashrus, unique cheskas kashrus, but for everything else, all you need is a lack of a chashad, being a yid with a natural cheskas kashrus and a lack of any other chashad. According to the Rambam, it seems like you have to have a cheskas kashrus for everything. The way the Alter Rebbe understands the Rambam and the way he fits it into the Mechaber and the Torah is that the special cheskas kashrus only applies when he sells to others, or even when he sells to others, only when he sells from a bunch of places. If he sells from one shoichet, we say you don't have to have a special cheskas kashrus because the shoichet has a cheskas kashrus and he's mirtas. He's going to be scared that they're going to ask by him. But only when you buy from a bunch of people, then you have this issue. Sai by shchita, and it seems like Alter Rebbe sai by everything else. And when it seems no, this only takes approach of the shach. Only by shchita this applies. For everything else, it doesn't apply. Tzlacha.